Hello and welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast. Today our guest is Anna. She's a founder of a channel, Anna from Ukraine, and she's a host of this channel. And there is the whole community with all the explanations, what is Ukraine, and you can buy merch and everything what is around Ukraine, which is very successful. 140,000 subscribers on YouTube have joined Anna's channel. Welcome, Anna, and thank you that you have found time for this conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be with your community because I believe YouTube and other social media give us unique opportunity to spread more information about really important things, being an ordinary citizen.
And that was exactly what I wanted to ask you as a first question. It is currently your practically full-time job to explain Ukraine to the world. What was the first idea? Why did you come to that? And what was the hardest thing to explain to the world what is important for the Ukrainians?
Thank you so much for this question and the way you describe it. Explain Ukraine to the world. That's exactly how I often speak about my channel and my mission that I have acquired since the start of full-scale invasion. Honestly, I have never took vlogging or blogging seriously. I had my job, I had my hobbies, and vlogging was not a part of that. But during these very first emotional days, I felt the need to express what it is like to be an ordinary Ukrainian, and I felt like the world lacks this real emotional subjective information apart from numbers, tactics, and strategies. And I had 47 subscribers on my channel, which I actually used to browse YouTube, not to upload something. And on the very next day, I've noticed that like 300 people watched, and I felt the responsibility, and I felt their comments and response, and they were all so supportive. And this actually inspired me to continue. And sometimes I say that these first vlogs of mine were more therapeutic than informational for the audience. But later, when I started learning more about YouTube, I've realized how few Ukrainian English-speaking voices are there. Fortunately, we are very strong. We support each other. There is no competition. There is just like how to make each other more visible, more prominent. And I'm very grateful to all the people around the world who, not being Ukrainian, speak about Ukrainian war, Ukrainian resilience in this time. But and now I feel this responsibility before like my community and Ukraine in general to continue providing this ordinary citizen updates.
When you talk about war, your videos they touch like all possible things, from Ukrainian culture to statistics of Russian artillery or aerial strikes on Ukrainian cities. Is it like it should be emotionally pretty hard to talk to the audience about such terrible things, but still there is a need to explain it. After more than 2 years of full-scale invasion and 10 years of Russia's war against Ukraine, do you feel that there is like some sort of Ukraine fatigue in the West?
Well, I come across this phrase really often. I'm afraid of this Ukraine fatigue, but at the same time, I can honestly tell you I don't feel it on the channel. I do realize this is my bubble, and these are people who care about Ukraine, about Eastern and Central Europe. These are people who have made this choice, and I'm actually very grateful because living in their normal, safe societies, sometimes really far away from Ukraine, they do choose to learn more about us, to worry for us, to support us. So that's why I'm super grateful. And in my community, I don't feel it. And personally, I believe that these things like fatigue, like anxiety, they come in waves. When nothing is happening, a period of stagnation, people can like get distorted. Unfortunately, Russia works really hard to cause chaos, problems, and conflicts in other parts of the world, trying to distract attention from war crimes in Ukraine. But I believe people have understood already that this is not a local conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It's not about territories. It's about the civilizational choices, and they do care in general. But we have to be realistic. In every society, there are like 10-25% of people who are active citizens, and they are not fatigued and they are doers. And I was actually very humbled when I've learned how many of my subscribers addressed their representatives, senators with letters. They actually shared these letters with me, and it works. It works in democratic societies when politicians feel the pressure from people, this desire to continue support of Ukraine. They have to react, and they simply pragmatically understand for the support on elections they need to do it, and they do it. So I'm super grateful to all those who call, who send messages, who email, who wear correct t-shirts. This works.
Absolutely. And we are talking to Anna, who is a founder of a channel, Anna from Ukraine, 140,000 subscribers on YouTube, a lot of information about what is going in Ukraine, not only in the context of the war, but also what is Ukraine's culture, what is Ukraine's identity. Don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel and to her channel. And if you subscribe, you will never miss the next interviews or the next information videos produced by Anna. Look, your name of your channel is Anna from Ukraine, which is actually, and even in the script which you use, is pretty resembles to Anna of Kiev, who was, for those who don't know, Anna was a daughter of a princess, a daughter of one of the most famous Kiev princes, Yaroslav, and it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was 12th or 11th century, even 11th century, and she was married
Yeah.
to Queen of France and was the first promoter of Ukraine's culture in Western Europe, and that is actually a sign that Ukraine always was a part of the Western world and was connected culturally, um, personally to Europe. What does it mean for you personally?
Well, thank you for this question, and I would like to start with this extremely important observation that I've made because of the channel. When it all began and we were just introducing each other, like me and my community, I did not feel very like proud of the choice of the name, because it's really simple. You may find channels that describe everything, and Anna from Ukraine seems like not very original. But later I have found out that many people leave in comments, write me, I don't know, Eric from Norway, Chuck from the US, and I have realized that this is one of the most basic, archaic, but at the same time cardial identities that people have when they describe themselves in the connection with their land. And in reality, let's forget about all of these, I know, PhDs and other stuff. And when we look at this essence of a person, it's very often Anna from Ukraine or, I don't know, Eric from Norway. And also, they have started rediscovering Ukrainian heritage in their history. And that was a blessing, because many people from, once again, Nordic countries, because like Yaroslav sent Anna to Kyiv and many others to Norway, Sweden, and they found these connections and they were surprised to learn. This is just like a huge proof of our European heritage and of how real, how legal our country was when Muscovy was still a swamp. And they were really excited, and many people started sharing this, what I love, the way how it sounds in English, Ukrainian heritage. It's not like origin, it's not like descendant, but heritage. And many have rediscovered it in their countries, in their cities. And this somehow legitimized this 1,000-year of history of Ukraine. And I continuously repeat, professionally and on the channel, that Ukraine is not new to Europe. We are just returning back home from a very bad period. We were hidden behind the Iron Curtain. We had to go through tremendous challenges, but we belong to Europe, and I'm happy to feel that more and more people realize we do.
Absolutely, and that is a pretty sad story, a story of hundreds of years of colonization and subjugation and of continuous genocide. When one remembers what Moscow did to the Ukrainian nation, and how artists and writers and intellectuals have been eliminated just in groups, not only during the Stalinist time, but also later or earlier, how Ukrainian language has been banned, how Ukrainian culture was banned, how Ukrainian church was subjugated to Moscow with the new priests being sent from Moscow, and the parishes have been closed. But when you talk about this, what does it mean for you, and what examples can be more understandable to the West? Because, like, when you start to speak about colonization, for example, in the West, then of course there will people emerge who say, "Look, you are a European-looking woman who speaks perfect English. You cannot be colonized. You're kidding. It cannot be colonization." I'm pretty sure you have pretty much of such people who have no idea what it looked like but have their opinion.
Thank you for this question. I do love all the questions that you put. Well, first of all, one of the most common reactions when I meet people, when I meet some of my subscribers, they honestly tell us, like, wow, I'm surprised that you're so normal, that you're so much like us. And especially those who visit Ukraine even in times of war, and we meet somewhere in Kyiv and they say, whoa, that's just like in Europe or just like in US, sometimes even better. And I think we don't have to get offended. Because some Ukrainians they feel like, oh, you should have known about us. We're just like normal people. Why did you think we're not? And so on. But this is all because of this decades, if not hundreds of years living behind the Iron Curtain. And I do like this phrase. I also work with Ukrainian daily newspaper The Day, and the editor-in-chief, Larisa Ivshina, once said that Ukraine is the greatest geographical discovery of the 21st century. Unfortunately, because of war, but also like this 30 years, we were not that active on the cultural diplomatic arena too. And I feel totally okay. Actually, I feel well when people relate to us, when they say, oh, you're just like us. And they have this, moreover, some who've been to Ukraine say there are things they like more in the country than, for example, in their home countries. And I have dug deep into this theory of Ukrainian colonization, especially when I was honored to work together with Suspilna Culture on a documentary. It's a 6-series documentary about the great Russian lies in different spheres of life, starting with history and finishing with sports. By the way, we are dubbing it English because there are lots of English speakers too, and we hope more people will be able to debunk this bloody myth. But I personally have a feeling that Russia is not an empire from this classical point of view. It's more of an ord. Because empire typically has unfortunately had a little bit higher level of like culture, higher level of education and well-being, and that's how it suppresses the colonies economically, with technologies and other stuff. And for Russia, it was never a thing. It traditionally stole the history, the inspiration, the philosophy from Ukraine. And one of these questions that is almost impossible to answer is the fact that Ukraine and Kyiv, for example, Kyiv is actually 665 years older than Moscow, almost like 666. And then there is a question like, it's not typical for a colony to actually accidentally found the empire, or this so-called empire. So I think there are some traces, typical traces of colonization, especially as Russian Empire rebranded itself from Moscow Tsardom and started expanding really quickly. And this is something that many nations who went through a similar experience understand really well, and it helps to explain this Ukrainian background. For example, bans on Ukrainian language, inability to learn, to develop in a particular region, or this awful genocides against Ukrainian elite. But at the same time, when I personally think about this 300 years of history, I cannot say it's a classical colony-empire relations, because we have a longer, brighter history, and somehow this center of empire was constantly feeding from Ukrainian or Kiev Rus ideas.
Indeed, and that is what Vladimir Putin and Russia are doing now. What they do with Ukraine, they bring Ukrainian resources stored in from equipment and factories that they started to steal from Donbass already in 2014, up to Ukrainian children who they have not started stealing Ukrainian children, kidnapping them in 2022. The first program was launched in 2014, 2015, once again from Russia occupied Donbass. And that is what they did like through the centuries, like by bringing historical artifacts from Ukraine to Russia's museums, to Hermitage, to others, the Scyths gold, or the mosaics of Ukrainian churches like St. Michael's Cathedral, mosaics from this cathedral destroyed in 1930s by Moscow. They are now in Moscow in Tretyakov Gallery, proudly represented there. And that is, of course, all the parts of this exploitation of rich Ukrainian economy and history and culture. But when you try to explain it to the West, what are your favorite examples? And what do you see is the example which people in, let me say, in the US, in Germany, or in Great Britain understand the most?
Well, one of the greatest advice that I've received on the channel was a comment, Anna, keep it simple. Because for many of us, your country was a part of rebellious Russia or something like that, and I feel totally okay with that. And in general, I believe that all the important things you have to be able to explain them in a simple way. Then it is true. And I do understand that our history is very complicated, and there are periods that are difficult even for me as a Ukrainian who studied that at school. But I love talking about the Kiev Rus period because, once again, it surprises many people still that Kiev is like 600 years older than Moscow.
And for those who watch us, Kiev Rus is 8th century up to approximately 12th or 13th century, and Kiev was a European metropolis. It was overrun by the Golden Horde in, if I'm not mistaken, 1230 something. And Berlin, the capital of Germany now, has been founded in 1237. So the history of Berlin started in the moment when Kiev already ended centuries of its prosperity and has been overrun by the Golden Horde.
Yeah, it was a very big, influential state, and I'd say quite modern and quite democratic if we look at the orders that existed at that time, if we look at the role of women in that society. And in general, that was a beautiful country, and its heritage is very much present in modern Ukrainian culture, literature, art, and so on. And even Christianity came on our territories with the Kiev princes, and Russia needed this story to create the myth of a big empire. And this is actually when Russian troubles start, because they constantly want to steal this fact. They cannot, because one of the most important conclusions that I have come up with, by stealing cultural and historical artifacts, even theories and personalities, you cannot steal the qualities that you need to possess to produce these things. And this is something that runs in our blood. And this is the reason why every time Russia attacks us, we demonstrate this huge resilience and we survive. Because with this hundreds of years of such tortures and suppressions, many nations would have disappeared. And this is something that tricks dictators like Putin. They believe we will give up, they will believe we will meet them with flowers, but we choose different flowers, to meet them with, and that's important. So I love talking about this period because this is also a period when Ukraine was actively participating in European cultural, trade, and military campaigns. Also, people love the history of Ukrainian Vikings. I have lots of viewers from Nordic countries who share our values, and they love this connection. Also, I think it's extremely important to speak about the 20th century because it was very tragic for Ukraine, and lots of our best people were eliminated during that period. And for example, the executed Renaissance, when the best of Ukrainian writers, philosophers, artists were all killed in less than half a year. And this is something that for many people still difficult to imagine. And I often try to imagine what our country would have been if these people survived, if millions of those who died because of Holodomor survived. This would be a definitely better, stronger country.
Of course, and we both know that there were the whole months and years. If you look at the statistics of the lifespan of Ukrainian scientists, members of Ukrainian Academy of Sciences, for example, there are an incredibly dense statistically pattern of deaths in 1937, where all people who were executed by the Stalinist Moscow because they were the top of the Ukrainian intellectual elite and they were not allowed to leave. But when we go into the modern situation, you have already mentioned the process of creativity, how creative is the Ukrainian way of resist, how creative the Ukrainians found the new ways of preserving their identity and to fight Russia back. What are the processes you observe now in the Ukrainian society? What are the discussions which are being run in Ukraine?
Well, I will tell you that, like, I was a person who, before the start of invasion, I was choosing the articles and international analysts and other people who would say full-scale invasion is impossible. That was my choice. That was my normalcy bias because I've realized how irrational and crazy that is. But Russia is crazy and irrational. That's why this full-scale war started. And I was afraid of how my people, my country, my president, my government will react. Will they stand together strong, or people will start talking, doubting? I don't know. And within the very first days, I felt such pride and relief when I realized that we are extremely united. Despite years of Russian propaganda, differences that exist between all countries or regions and so on, we were extremely united. And now, after 2.5 years almost of full-scale war, after 10 years of war in general, and hundreds of years of this resilience against Russian suppression, I realized that we are more united than ever. And this is something that Putin achieved, like just the contrary to what he expected. And I'd say that many people who were more neutral, who were more tolerant to Russian narratives, they've seen it. And for example, the beautiful city of Kharkiv, I like it. I have complicated relations with it. I defended my PhD there in 2011, and Lenin was still in the center of the square, and it was just like unusual for me coming from the western part of Ukraine. But at the same time, it is a city with a tremendous heritage of Ukrainian culture and resilience. This is the city of executed Renaissance, of Ukrainian theaters, best writers, and today the city demonstrates enormous bravery, and there are schools built in the underground, and many people send me these photos and they, wow, cool. I cannot say it's cool. It's not cool when children have to have their classes in the underground because they can be killed with a Russian bomb any moment. But it is indeed great how brave these people are who remain in the city and who keep all these territories alive, because this is also important. I'm not speaking about the active war zones, but in general, I'm at all with these people who remain and keep cities, territories alive. And like, there was a huge wave of people, if you want to speak about language, many people switched to Ukrainian. I'd say like many people spoke Ukrainian, and Ukrainian was the dominant language, but many still treated it as a colonized people, as the language for like home communication, but not the language of science or the language of business. And I have been in the situation when people literally switched, like they spoke Ukrainian at home and then they switched to business Russian. And that's all the result of this decades of Russification, inability to get access to information in your native language, and so on. And what is really beautiful, many children and teenagers now feel it's extremely like fashionable, and they are proud of regaining Ukrainian. And I am a native Ukrainian speaker in my family. We always spoke Ukrainian, and my ear can recognize the learned version of Ukrainian. I feel it's a newly acquired language, but in most cases it is better than mine, because they use richer vocabulary. They show off with this language in a positive way. And there are lots of Russian-speaking soldiers on the front lines, and we do understand that. That's not the reason for a conflict in the country. But we do have to support Ukrainian language after decades of its elimination, and all the, like, many languages would have already disappeared. And it's a blessing that we have it, and I so much wish that Belarus language can return back to the population. And it's so sad to see interviews where people mock their own language, for example. This is what they try to make Ukrainians do too. And it is always a very bad symptom if someone makes you laugh at your own language, your own small city. It's just like laughing at your mom.
And that is, of course, the one of most spread tools of colonization, to make people be ashamed of their heritage, of their culture, and to internationalize this hierarchical approach to their own nation, thinking that their nation is of lower quality, which of course it is not. But during these 2.5 or almost 2.5 years of full-scale invasion, do we observe a situation when the Ukrainians themselves are being a bit like positively surprised of how united the nation is? That is partly what you've described when Kharkiv is using the Ukrainian language and fighting back Russia's aggression, being just in 40 kilometers from the Russia's border, or when people in occupied territories of Kherson and Zaporizhia region continue to resist Russia's occupation. And frankly speaking, 3 years ago, nobody believed, or very few believed, that people in Kherson or in Zaporizhia, southern Russian-speaking mostly regions, that they would so bravely and risking their life and risking being executed, tortured, killed, that they will oppose Russia's occupation. Did the Ukrainians like rediscover themselves, their bravery and their strength?
Yes, of course. And I believe there are some features present in our like culture, in our literature, in our family traditions that actually make people value this freedom. It's important for us. And I have witnessed lots of really dramatic examples when people do not accept, for example, safety, security, when they have to lose freedom. So we do have this gene of freedom shared by many nations in the world, not making us specific, but I mean, we do have it, and it is of value in Ukraine. It's not words. Going through this really unusual period in your life, like living in times of war, something I could not visualize for myself. I have discovered lots of emotions that many people won't, and they won't be in that context, and it's really good. But at the same time, this love for your country is real. It's very real. It's so strong. It can make you cry looking at your street with your trees that you passed by when you went to school. I remember when I've listened to people who were in a short period of occupation in Kyiv region, and they were explaining to those good advisors, like, negotiate, give up some territories. These are not territories. Well, of course, these are not just about territories and so on, but these are homes. These are schools. These are the places where you had your fast keys or where your mother is buried. There are lots of things that when you are separated from them forever, you are half yourself. You're losing something forever. Unfortunately, we are losing lots of things, people, emotions forever, but at the same time, I keep telling it to the subscribers. All these patriotic poems, songs, marches that you've learned from like 17th, 18th century when your countries were under outstanding circumstances, it's real. And I think that many have felt it that way. When you understand, no, it's not just the house. No, it's not just the street. It's something that I need to be happy. It's not only about love for Muslim. This is your selfish love when you do feel good. I travel a lot, but I am so worried when I'm outside Ukraine that something will happen to my country, and people often laugh at me saying like, do you plan like to stop a missile or what? No, but you have this fake but extremely strong feeling that you control at least something when you're home in such challenging times. So I believe many of people felt that. And we should not underestimate Ruski Mir. People saw what it is. People saw it in Crimea, in Donetsk and Luhansk, and once beautiful, rich regions that Russia constantly persuaded were dependent on it, were feeding all the Ukraine, now look extremely bad. And cities and regions surrounding this quasi so-called republics, they have seen what it is. What are universities like in this so-called DPR? What are people like? And simply from this pragmatic point of view, they did not want it to come to Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, or Odessa. Now people like very well see what Ruski Mir brings to this world, and that is another motivation to oppose it. Plus, literally, they destroy schools, they destroy hospitals, they target people day and night. And these are the things you cannot understand or forgive. And what this war actually did, it persuaded all those who doubted, maybe Russia is good, maybe that's our brother, that no, it is not.
And that is what we observed with like talking to many people in Ukraine who said, oh, we knew that it will be hard, but we could not imagine that the brutality of the Russian army will reach that level and the Russian soldiers will do that things on that mass scale level, like not just like 1 or 10 or 100 cases, thousands, dozens of thousands of cases, and celebration of the air raids and shelling and missile strikes over the Ukrainian cities by a huge part of Russia's population. That is what no person can explain. Was it for you something what you expected?
I don't know. Was it my like normalcy bias that I've mentioned already, or my desire to hide from this kind of information? But I did choose to believe that full-scale war with Russia is impossible. Not because Russia is normal. I've learned it is not, and I was lucky to be born in the region that suffered less. Like, we did not have Holodomor in Volyn. We were occupied by Soviet Union in 1939, not in 1917 or 2022, and more like of architecture and other stuff stayed here. And I've learned these crimes and everything, but I realized it's an irrational and very violent kind of war. No one could imagine like aviation working, you know, like so what we expected with all these troops at the borders, the majority of Ukrainians did. Maybe some smart military advanced people did, but I do know even like local police, local political authorities, and so on. Everyone thought they might provoke a new escalation in the part of anti-terroristic operation somewhere in the east, and all Ukrainian army was standing there very reformed and very strengthened since 2014. Huge revolution took place. And then I do remember this morning when I received like a phone call. Millions of Ukrainians received a phone call with the phrase like it started, just like it started, nothing else. And then you start Googling and you look at Facebook and you see explosions in Kyiv. You realize, oh no, it's not like we were expecting it to continue. And 20 minutes later, you hear explosions in my city. I was in Lutsk, and our airfield was targeted. And it's kind of unbelievable. Like you're reading, like your capital is being torn, and you hear explosions next to you. We were very much afraid that internet will go out. That was one of the major concerns because in mobile phone, that's what they target, and people were looking for different ways to communicate during this period without but fortunately it did not happen. Blackouts were planned for the next year. But it was a very unusual experience. And I remember the morning after these bombings when I went out to buy something additional. You have Ukrainians like to store things, and queues of people, and everyone is very polite, everyone actually helping each other to get what you need. So people do not steal medications that you need or something. They actually want to separate it so that you will have enough. And then I remember seeing lots of men in the military uniform all around the streets and military cars. You did not expect they exist in your city, in your region. And this desire to I don't know, hug these people because you love their presence and you understand they are here to help the region stay. And it was also a period when I felt finally the world cannot ignore it anymore and pretend that Russia did not annex Crimea. All the masks, they fell down, and many Ukrainians spoke about this fact that it's just sometimes premonition, if I'm correct in the choice of the word, is more difficult than the reality itself. When you are constantly surrounded by this context, it's actually buzzing. And these February days, they are very bad for every Ukrainian, with the tragic killings of the Heavenly Hundred on Maidan and many other things happening in this period. And in general, these are dark days of the season. And it was all there is a film, Melancholia, if I'm not mistaken, with Kirsten Dunst, and there is a comet or planet approaching, and you hear that sound, that vibration. It was the same. We learned, we read the warnings from this intelligence services from the US. We realized it's very likely that it's coming. We knew they have banks of blood, which is not typical for training and other stuff, but we still hoped it won't happen. Because I often get these questions, why didn't all people evacuate? And then you realize, it doesn't work like that, guys. Well, first of all, someone has to remain for a country to survive, because if we all leave, first of all, you will all have serious problems, and second, the country will disappear. Plus, no one would accept refugees before the start of war. And it was just a hope. But then when it started, was another feeling okay, now you see it, now you know it. It's just like getting a diagnosis. Sometimes it's easier than looking for it.
That is what gives a lot of hope, as Ukraine has not only survived the full-scale invasion of Russia in February 2022, but also continues to fight Russia back for longer than 2 years, which nobody believed, and I think that many Ukrainians couldn't believe. that this is possible to fight Russia for such a longer time, and now creating new ways of being resilient, of being strong, of being ready to fight for freedom. Also, with such outlets like Anna from Ukraine, we have just talked for over 40 minutes with Anna, who is a founder and host of Anna from Ukraine, a podcast which explains to the world what Ukraine is about, what Ukrainian fight is about. Don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe, Anna from Ukraine, and also for our European Resilience Initiative Center channels. And thank you, Anna, for what you're doing.
And thank you so much for European resilience. This is very important for our future victory. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And don't forget to wait for the next video podcast from Anna from Ukraine and from the European Resilience. Stay strong, stay with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!